Well, that was odd. That should have run an intro there, but it didn't. But we'll carry on anyway. Now we are pre-recording. It is 9:09 p.m. the night
Wow.
before you watch this, and we're out. Well, I'm in my dungeon. You're in your kitchen.
Yeah.
Welcome to episode 119 of the Auto Talk Weekly Wrap. We're going to make this a short one because it is late, and I have to get up very early to go to town because of March Madness, which means that traffic sucks. Um,
Yeah, it
you
has
guys,
been. And it's a lunar eclipse tomorrow as well, a full moon, a blood moon, and a lunar eclipse, which means everybody's going to be mad.
we're all to blame because we sold too many people too many cars. That's the reason why there's traffic.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. You run with that,
Drop the mic,
Richard. You
walk
go
away.
for that. Anyway,
Yeah.
coming from the live from the McDonald's kitchen, which is debuting as a studio tonight, but excuse our bits and pieces. That's
When
how
you cook
live
a
the news is. We can't wait to come to a studio. We just got to bring it to you right now while it's hot.
when when you cook a burger in there, is that a McDonald's burger?
You know, I tried as a youngster once. I know we're not supposed to be harping on stuff tonight. We've got a bit of a time schedule. But when I was young, very young, I went to McDonald's in St. Luke's and said that because my name was Graham MacDonald, could I please have a free burger? And they laughed at me. I never forgot it, bastards. Damn it, McDonald's.
Oh, right. Anyway. On with the news. So let's start off with this one if I can get the right window up. I changed my browser a few weeks ago and I regret it. Eagers Automotive aiming at Australian 12 billion in sales in 2025. Now we just put this lead because they are, of course, in New Zealand with a few different
Yeah.
brands. Um, the Eagers Automotive recently announced its financial results for the 12 months that ended December 31. 2024, claiming it has outperformed the industry. It delivered revenue of Australian $11.2 billion, an increase of 13.6% on financial year 2023. Underlying operating profit before tax for financial year 2024 was $371 million versus $433 million the year before. Company believes with additional growth forecast, it will surpass Australian 12 billion in revenue for the 2025 financial year. Of course, a few dealerships around the place contributing to that from New Zealand. John
Mm-hmm.
Ford, North Harbour Ford. A couple of dealerships are based around what used to be Davey Motors out in Manukau. So I think that's Nissan and MG out there now. Yeah, good to see that the New Zealanders are hopefully contributing a little bit to
Well,
that big success.
I'd argue and say that unless they're particularly poor at business, it can't fail because the market right now is so hot for good used stock, and that's not just that's across used import, but also New Zealand franchise vehicles outside of the traditional networks. There's a real shortage of stock, and if you've got it, and the likes of Eagers, for example, tapping into their franchises, franchise chains, they're in a perfect position to capitalize on that. So, well done, obviously, but I think that result is as much around just the demand there is for good quality used vehicles at the moment, let alone the franchises.
Well, I think the interesting thing is though Australia's had an okay year last year for new
Yeah.
vehicle sales, but there's a lot of concern in Australia that the party may be over for a wee while. So we'll see what that does. Yeah, maybe it's hopefully we start to see some glimmers of hope in the New Zealand market. Glimmers.
Well, don't forget when the new market starts to lose a bit of its steam,
Mm.
buyers haven't necessarily left the market, but there may be greater demand once again on used stock as well. And hence the point I said, irrespective of how the new market works in Australia, the used car sales paradoxically actually sometimes do better when the demand at the top end for new is cooled. Consumers
Yes,
move down a
yes,
couple of years.
that is exactly correct. And I'm just pulling up now, just for a second, the used secondhand car stats. They've been raging the last few months. They're actually relatively static in February. So deal at a public up 1.9% on passenger cars, but on commercials up 17.1%. So yeah, interesting. Interesting. Now let's look at the next story. One that we see pop up once in a while. Two Cheap Cars Group has secured a new finance facility with ANZ Bank. Two Cheap Cars Group has executed a new finance facility with its primary transactional banking partner. And the bank, under this facility agreement, has secured working capital finance, including a new $5 million trade finance loan and a $1 million commercial flexi facility. Chief Executive David says these ranges are a significant milestone for the company, supporting both inventory purchases and operational growth. I always find it weird that they announced these facilities because why? But I believe they have to announce them because of this whole stock market thing. It's a weird one, that one.
Well, I wonder if there's a story behind the story, and without casting shade upon it, it has, and they mentioned in the story that it's a challenging trading environment, and it has been for quite some time, and that does have an impact on your capital. This is an incredibly capital-intensive business, as we know, and slowdowns have an enormous effect on that conveyor belt that you have to have of money flowing on through. And I wonder whether we're seeing a bit of an impact there with the need for the group to grow and some of the new dealerships they're putting in place. They're capital intensive at a time when the capital flow and turnover is not necessarily at the rate they need it to. I wonder if there's a bit of that sort of impact coming on through too. That's not to cast shade upon the business and its ability to operate, but simply in challenging times, your capital needs tend to be greater because you just can't turn that dollar over as fast as you would normally do under good conditions.
Mm-hmm. Right. BMW Group New Zealand recognises its 2024 high-performing dealers. BMW Group hosted an awards ceremony at the Auckland Art Gallery to recognise and reward its 10 dealers across New Zealand for their contributions and achievements throughout 2024. The dealers played a pivotal role, etc., etc. So, Dealer of the Year, Christchurch BMW, Excellence in Customer Support, Hawke's Bay BMW. I'm not going to run all through these, but some really obviously good dealerships there that have done pretty darn well. So feel free to go to the website and have a look through those. Relatively late in the season. I feel we're a bit late in the season for the Dealer of the Year awards, but yeah. I guess
well, everyone can get through Christmas, right?
Twitter and Lexus did theirs last week, so I guess you got to wait for a booking for a thing. Now, here we go. We're going to talk about this story is going to be a wee bit controversial. I think Graham and I have different views on this. Different views. And the reason behind that is because you've got to look behind the scenes and look at some of the broader coverage. Now, my guys here have put up the pretty straight government line on this, to be fair, but there's a bit broader stuff behind this. Government looks to scrap EV mandates in procurement overhaul. Electric vehicle mandates for government vehicles are set to be removed under the proposed change to procurement rules. The changes aim to make it easier for New Zealand businesses to secure a share of more than $50 billion in government contracts awarded each year. Under current procurement rules, mandated agencies must choose a battery electric vehicle or a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle if a BEV is not appropriate. This was part of the government's carbon neutral program, which aims to speed up the fleet transition to low emission vehicles and support New Zealand's transition to a net zero emissions economy by 2050. Economic Growth Minister Nicola Willis says the reforms are aimed at removing red tape and creating more opportunities for local businesses. The changes include introducing a new economic benefit test and scrapping 24 rules that put unnecessary obstacles in the path of Kiwi businesses. As part of our plan to increase jobs and incomes by shifting New Zealand to a faster growth track. The economic benefit test will require government agencies to consider the wider benefits to New Zealand when awarding contracts. Now, these pros and various things. Build new non-residential government buildings to a 5-star rating standard. The rules they're removing are building new non-residential governments with a 5-star rating standard, purchase battery electric or hybrid electric vehicles, purchase offer supplies that produce low amounts of waste and or are recyclable, and pay the living wage in contracts of cleaning, catering, and security guard services. So they're scrapping all those things. Now, the reason this pisses me off is none of what that says makes any sense. And if you actually look through it, and this has been published by the broader media, most of this is being triggered by a promise to New Zealand first, and much of that is on the basis of them wanting to cut woke ideology from government purchasing decisions. So how does none of that make any sense? Well, how is shifting from electrified vehicles to non-electrified vehicles going to make it any easier for any New Zealand business to sell a car to the government? Graham, which New Zealand businesses build cars and sell them to the government?
We don't have Trekker anymore, do we? Can I just check and make sure we don't have Trekker? So, yeah, I know. None. We don't build cars in New Zealand, Richard. We know
and now
this.
the other factor to that is the rules that have been set do not stop government departments from buying non-electrified vehicles if they make better sense. And we've seen many examples of this carry on over the last couple of years. It's a guidance. To me, it makes sense. Most of the business fleets now are choosing to go that way anyway, because if you're looking at a business that has access to capital and is looking at total cost of ownership, they're going down that electrified route already. It doesn't make sense to me.
We can agree or disagree, and I think you're probably correct in a lot of what you say, Richard. My take on it is slightly different. I've always had a bit of an issue around how can I put this politely? I don't like being told what to do. That's been a mantra all the way through my business career, I suppose.
They're not telling you what to do.
I accept that it is not, but I find that some of the recent interpretations have maybe been taken a little bit too literally. And I think in this case, if Winston Peters' sticky paws are all over it, well, yes, he's made a bit of a crusade on the whole woke bandwagon, and that's going to be a hiding to nowhere. But it appeals to his 5 or 6% constituency. But I also accept that for a number of businesses, there may have been issues with purchasing and finding or sourcing or otherwise speccing up vehicles that are actually appropriate for the contract as opposed to appropriate within the specifications of the contract. And I accept that they may have to have a bit more leniency than they have currently got under the current circumstances. And I'd like to see a little bit more of a lateral view towards it. Does this mean we push away our goals towards carbon neutral 2050? No. Does it mean to say that we halt the pathway towards electrification? No, it does not. But like everything, I felt that many of these things have been adversely affected, I think, a wee bit by our race to push along the electrification agenda rather than let, to an extent, a natural market force take place. And I've talked about this time and time again.
And this is where
clean car the clean car discount. I'd like
and this
to see
is where the funny thing with this
there.
is going to be is that I think most of these fleets are still going to buy the exact same vehicles,
and they may well do. If that's the right vehicle for the contract,
all we've done is tied up hours and hours of committee and cabinet and parliament that they could be using to probably fix that mess of a school children lunch program to change a rule that will have no freaking thing. And I know it's not car based, but basically saying, well, now you don't have to worry about your contractors paying a living wage to your cleaners. I mean, it's just still it just still feels a bit dumb and dastardly.
Well, it's optics, isn't it?
And you would think that with the backlash we're seeing about certain things that are happening in the States, that maybe that they would have thought, let's just maybe stay away from this stuff for a little while.
Well, it's obviously on the cooker for a little while, and you're right, the timing is not great. But on the other hand, the government is under constant pressure, I do understand, to address the shortfalls in the budget. And we're not really much closer to that, it would appear, than we were a year ago.
But how does this do anything to address the shortfalls in the budget?
So when I talk about the budget, I'm talking, I suppose, about the macro New Zealand budget, where we're trying to restart an economy that's frankly stalled. And any sort of measure at all that instills a degree of confidence back in consumers or businesses. And whether that comes down to saying, look, you know what, we're going to remove some of these red tape things that you just don't like. Whether you're right or not liking it is irrelevant. We're going to give you the sense that it's a bit easier to do things.
How does this change the red tape for anyone?
And again, Richard, optics. It gives the sense... It does. If you're a lot of small business owners or medium-sized business owners are probably not sitting there analysing this sort of stuff to death. They're not. We make a living of it. We immerse ourselves in these issues for the industry around motor vehicles. But we forget sometimes that for a lot of small businesses and medium-sized, this is the last sort of thing to worry about on their agenda, and yet they're forced to confront it. And there's a degree of, I think, reluctance because of the way that they are being forced to modify their buying behaviours.
This applies to government agencies. How is it forcing
If you want a government contract, and let's face it, there are so many now walks of our business community that are involved in some respect to being touching in some way a government-funded contract. Now, if you're involved, so if we look at this and look at the heavy transport sector, for example, rather than just cars, ultimately, what does that mean for the heavy transport industry, where it's looking at whole of life costs around the carbon neutrality of its fleet moving forward? Because there aren't really cost-effective solutions in that marketplace yet. We're seeing them slowly bubble their way to the surface, but they're not there yet. The BYD Shark is probably the first genuine vehicle we've seen for the utility market that provides a really viable option for fleets looking for a vehicle in the utility sector, but it still has issues around the ultimate towing capacity for some of these larger government departments that do tow a lot, trailers and bits and pieces of equipment and rollers and gear like that. So we don't yet have all the solutions. And so we're having to modify some of those purchasing decisions based around the sort of vehicle that we're allowed to apply for, as opposed to might be best suited for purpose. But I also take your point. We had was it Doc that purchased, I think, 7 or 8 new Chevrolet Silverados, or Landcorp, one of the groups there, just because of the sheer towing capacity needed. Beg your pardon?
It was Niwa.
Was it Niwa? That's right. So you're right. There was still the ability to purchase.
None of them have been forced to buy vehicles that don't work. They've just basically been said, if do what you can to buy down that path. And yeah.
Okay, that's a good way of putting it. I'm glad you said that. That's do what you can, not what you have to, but do what you can. That's probably the best line you've said all night.
But you've got to go. I look at it from the other side. Is that, and I think it's and people. I'll get called a dirty lefty or something. The irony is I've never voted left in my life. You know that, Graham. That I just don't like this being attached to all this vitriol about wokeness that everyone else in New Zealand government seems to have even freaking Seymour seems to have realised it's not a barrier you want to push at the moment, and yet we've got Winston tacking this in alongside diversity and all sorts of other stuff.
When has Winston ever listen to the room when it comes to these sort of things? He's got his own political.
We've got to remember this.
There's the joys of a coalition government, right?
We've got to wonder. You've got to wonder, though. I mean, this is our deputy prime minister, and I also wonder if, he and certain others may be thinking that, wow, this is working so great in America at the moment, etc., etc. Let's jump on that bandwagon. I'm not sure it is, and we've seen some rather gnarly polls out there for the government in the last week, and particularly for Christopher Luxon. Mm-hmm. And I do wonder if the worm is turned on that kind of stuff being a great barrier to push anymore, and lumping all this stuff in. I don't know if it is anymore. So yeah. Anyway,
watch this space, I guess. I agree. Look, it's all about optics, isn't it? And I think the timing of this is probably poor. And it may be in latter times, they might look back on this and think not the best time to push that particular barrier. But again, this is not a government initiative. You're absolutely right. It's a New Zealand First initiative.
No. This is the problem. Is it is a New Zealand First initiative, but by means of process, it's being run through as a national party or a government.
Not national party. Government policy.
Yes, but it's being fronted by Nicola Willis. So it's a delicate one. It is a very delicate one. So yeah. Anyway, moving on. That wasn't as much of an argument as I was expecting. I must have made sense to you.
Just didn't want to be too confrontational tonight. But I tell you what, I do feel sorry for the EV sector right now when it seems to be just hit after hit after hit after hit. It really does, and
it's actually starting to come back. Its market share's actually risen a little over the last couple of months, and I think a lot of people in that sector are believing this is the year it will actually return back to a sensible portion of the market. I think when anyone's expecting it to go back to 25-26%, but if we get into the high single digits, I think they'll be quite happy this year, and I think that's good organic growth. Is the point. We're also about to see a bit of a price war in EVs. So
I think it's also fueled by just the sheer proliferation of new models coming to market. And we went through a great burst in 23, if you recall, 22, 23, of just so much new product coming to, and new brands coming to market. 24, I'm not so sure. We had new brands, but I'm not sure about necessarily a lot of new models that we really noticed. But 25 appears to be the year of a pretty steady slew of new and affordable vehicles with, as you say, a price war coming. And that alone will attract consumers back. And when I talk about organic growth, that's what I love to see. This is how I want the electric market to work. I want it to take place because people want to buy them, not because they're incentivized to buy them.
And you're sounding all lovey towards EVs. Maybe I should swap out that Prado I've given you for that road trip for an electric vehicle.
Have I ever turned down an electric vehicle, Richard?
Have you ever turned down a vehicle?
Well, no, actually, you know what? I'm a bit of a, when it comes to a vehicle at the end of the day. But don't forget, this is the guy that seriously looked at a couple of models we've tested in the last year or two and said, I could see that in my garage.
Yes.
Anyway. All right, move on.
Armstrong's new Porsche showroom reflects long-term strategy. Look at that flash building. Armstrong's has opened a new Porsche showroom and workshop in Wellington. The 2.5-year project involves a multi-stage $14 million development with more developments planned over the next decade. The Porsche showroom features an improved layout and enhanced functionality for a superior customer experience, says the company. That's a pretty impressive dealership.
Pretty nice bit of real estate. Do you ever think, this is a bit naughty to say this, but do you ever think that buyers of, for example, a new Porsche, look at that building, they think, how much of the price tag of my Porsche is paying for that? And if it was the old building, would my Porsche be cheaper?
Maybe. Yeah. Right. Heartland have reported a 3.9% half-year decline in motor vehicle finance. We saw a big jump in motor vehicle finance in the first half of last year and the second half of the previous year as mortgage rates went up. Finance rates went up, penetration rates went up, but that seems to have now been hit by the decline in the car market itself. So Heartland Group reports a 3.9% half-year decline in its motor vehicle receivables to 1.6 billion. Reported a net profit after tax of 3.6 million for the 6 months ended December 31, down 90.4% on the year before. And underlying NPAT was 10.7 million. Despite its overall decline in motor vehicle finance, the group says growth through its direct channels was up 20.1% from June 30, 2024, driven by an increase in marketing activity and Heartland Bank's partnership with Tesla as one of two preferred finance providers. Busy thing for there, but I think that's a trend we'll see come through in a few of the announcements over the coming 3 months as we get through kind of the half-year stuff. That perhaps that penetration has been down, though profit may not be because, of course, finance rates are up.
I got to say, I disagree. I am hearing that the finance market, certainly through the people that we talk to, is up. That there's been not just sort of a steady trajectory, but it's actually been some good growth in that market. The first quarter of 2025 has not been bad at all within the finance sector.
But the last quarter of 2024 wasn't great, and that's the period we're measuring, really.
True, very true. But then we just had the results through, I think, from MTF and I do believe Turner's with their finance arm through Oxford was showing strong growth through that, I do believe. So I don't think it's necessarily an industry-wide issue. It may be as much around, I don't want to say that Heartland's having a harder run than others, but there may be some winners and losers in that particular fight for the business, particularly retail business.
It's also interesting. Is Tesla a partner you want at the moment?
Well, yeah, that certainly wouldn't have reflected in the end quarter of 2024. But I have to say, I don't know what's going on in Tesla sales in New Zealand at the moment. I haven't looked at the statistics, but I wonder if we'll see an influence in those as well.
Now, Interchange grants license exemption for electric trucks. Keeping in mind that trucks is one of the areas the government is still funding electric vehicles. Drivers how much longer? Drivers with a Class 1 license now to legally operate heavier electric vehicle trucks under a new exemption announced by the NZ Transport Agency. The Land Transport Driver Licensing Rule 999, drivers of electric trucks up to 7,500 exemption notice 2025. That's a long piece of work.
Yeah.
Came into effect on February 28. The temporary exemption allows Class 1 license holders who would typically be limited to a vehicle with a gross laden weight of up to 6,000 kgs to drive electric trucks up to 7,500 kilograms. You can read more about that over at Transport Talk. Smart move. Now they just need to go and review the GVM rules for utes in general. Because I know the electrified ones are struggling to make the numbers work on that as well.
This is the weight factor. This is the weight factor. The unladen weight factor.
Yep. And that's not just something that's facing full-on electric utes. It's actually more an issue for PHEV utes.
Pardon me, my cat's just wandered across the screen.
There's much of a problem for PHEV utes as it is for electric ones. That weight issue. Interestingly, I was over in Australia last week at an electric show and I discovered that the weight of the F-150 Lightning is not that much more than the weight of the Ford Ranger PHEV. You take the entry level weight of the Lightning and the Ford Ranger and the upper weight of the Ford Ranger PHEV, the Storm Track model.
Yep.
Not that different. There is a difference, not different, because you don't need an extra gearbox, a transfer case, all sorts of other stuff, an engine in the BEV.
Yep.
So interesting to see that. Now, on to the next one. Geely. We're talking about new brands. Geely has launched in New Zealand under the Giltrap Group. They are very excited about this one. This is pretty much one of the biggest distributor or companies in China as far as vehicles go. They, of course, own Volvo, they own Zeekr, they own a whole pile of other brands. Huge product portfolio. I've spent some time with one in Australia. It is a high quality product. And then they've come out fighting. They have come out with an entry level price of $51,990 for a mid-size electric SUV with pretty decent specification and range. It's a very mature product. Yes, and Dane Fisher, who's leading their efforts in this space at the moment, he's their head of retail. He basically said this is kind of a Toyota moment, and they think this brand could be incredibly big. And he says that he believes in 2 to 3 years this will be the biggest brand being distributed by the Giltrap Group. So that's really saying something. Michael Giltrap was on the trip with us this week, and he shared a similar sentiment. They think this is massive. I think this is massive. And Geely could be quite the opportunity for them in the New Zealand market. And it's an interesting one too, and it's the first Chinese brand to launch in a while, which has said they will have pure ICE vehicles. So they're going to go for a multi-drivetrain platform, plan. So they will have electric, they will have plug-in hybrid, very long-range plug-in hybrids, standard hybrids, and next year I believe we'll see some pure ICE. That sounds terrible. Pure internal combustion. Small SUVs. So they're very much taking, I think, something in every segment kind of policy there.
The burning question, Richard, and you've just said it yourself, is it Geely or is it Geely? What's the official word?
I'm going with Geely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they've done very well in Australia, haven't they? Done very well in Australia, haven't they?
Yes. Well, they've actually launched there as well, but they've certainly got some reactions.
I thought the orders have been really strong, haven't they?
Yeah, possibly. Well, they only opened pre-orders 24 hours ago, so maybe.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking of a different. thinking of a different brand. I'm thinking of a different brand. Sorry.
Yep. Now, interestingly, BYD reacted fairly swiftly. Though they say it was planned for a while. They've lowered some of their prices and introduced some new entry-level models. So we might be entering a little bit of a price war period in that market. So yeah. Yep. The list price, as opposed to special clearance price, for a mid-size electric SUV dropped from a low of $54,990 to $49,990 in one night. So the fall dropped $5,500 or over 10% in literally 10% overnight with the launch of that car. So
it's such a difficult position to be in though for the consumers, and I mean, right now it's the Polestar effect we're talking about. I see Polestar 2 sales numbers have been really good, only because Polestar are clearing them out at a price that you know damn well they can't repeat. At least not of that sort of specification package anyway. But once again, I look at consumers and I think, well, okay, this is really good for first buyers of vehicles. But for existing ones, and therefore, if you're looking at a value proposition, is the market hasn't yet stabilized yet. We keep saying, okay, once the market gets to a point where it's stable, people got an understanding of its resale, of its residuals, where lease companies in particular understand the residuals, we'll see a bit more appetite to get in that pathway. But right now, for example, as a dealer, I really don't know what a lot of this product is worth if it came as a trade, because I just don't know what its real market value is. Is it the value of the unit that's being resold by the distributor, as some do? Is it the value that I see advertised on, Trade Me, Marketplace, other platforms? Nobody really knows. And there are very few wholesalers in the business, and I know a few of those that deal in the New Zealand new market, that also understand what these are worth as well. That most are very shy to put a price on them because they just don't know where consumer sentiment will sit for a used vehicle compared to the ever plunging price of new products. I had hoped that we'd see a bit of settling in after the clearance of the old stock had gone through. We're just about through those old models, but it appears not. And it does to an extent cannibalize people from having confidence in the value of that product going forward.
Well, we will see. We'll see what the year brings. Last story, 5-head roll of Nissan board reshuffles senior management.
Yeah.
Nissan Motor Company's board of directors have terminated chief executive Makoto Uchida and 4 more senior executives in a bid to turn around the struggling manufacturer. April 1, Chief Planning Officer Ivan Espinoza, pictured above, has been appointed as the Representative Executive Officer, President and Chief Executive. Reporting to Espinoza will be Julian Cartier, Chief Performance Officer and Chairperson of the Management Committee for AMIO. He will have an expanded role that includes global marketing and customer experience. Aichi Akashi, currently Corporate Vice President of the Vehicle Planning and Vehicle Component Engineering Division, will become Chief Technology Officer and Executive Officer. Interesting news there.
You know what's really interesting, what caught my eye on this story was, again,
non-Japanese management.
Non-Japan, and for a Japanese corporation of that size, this is, well, it's not quite unheard of, but that's really unusual. And I wonder whether that's just an admission from the board of Nissan that things really are in the stroke. Although the last person that I recall that took over a Japanese brand that was a European rather than Japanese was Carlos Ghosn. And there's still some speculation as to how well that worked out for them as well. So,
well, there is an argument that Ghosn went gone because he was doing too well and not working with the Japanese style. I find it interesting that it's unclear, but some of the people there, I think, certainly come through the old Renault channel, and I do wonder if maybe it's indicative that Renault might be tipping in a little there. But we'll see. We'll see. Yes. Interesting
times for Nissan. They do have a bit of a hill to climb with the dropout from Honda and Mitsubishi from talks. Watch this space. That'll be the story. Yeah. One of the stories, I think, of 2025 is Nissan Motor Corporation.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens between now and next Friday when we have the next AutoTalk weekly wrap. Potentially one done live. I don't know. And you're not away that weekend. Anyway, we'll work it out.
Oh, I'm heading away. No. Why? What's special about next Friday? What have I missed?
Nothing. I just wasn't sure if you're away next week.
No, I'm going to be on the ground. It's you that's buggering off around the place, tripping around the countryside. And me, I'm just holding down the anchors in the humble abode of Henderson, West Auckland.
I'm here next week. We're all good.
Right.
I'm here for 2 weeks.
We'll do a live show.
Here for 2 weeks and then off to Spain. But anyway, right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'll catch you next week on the AutoTalk Weekly Wrap. And I'm going to try and play our sting, but I don't think it's going to work.
It's not going to work.